I don't envy really the position of the president right now, because you have a budget to fund. You know, there's all these expectations about the stall projects that you're talking about. We need to do this. We also need to start new projects, you know, so that we can spur economic development. But how do we fund all these projects? You know, you can only fund them through 3 ways. Number one is to borrow. As we speak, there is a lot of, we have not been able to properly audit the amount of money Kenya owes, like how much our debt is. And it's such a critical thing because there is a constitutional requirement of the debt ceiling. And there's all the analysis are saying that we have probably surpassed the debt ceiling. And therefore, even if the president wanted to borrow, or even if he wanted to borrow to finance the budget, that's not even an option. In any case, again, we promise Kenya that we're not going to borrow again. So you can't borrow. If you're not borrowing, then you must increase taxes. And I'm talking about a Kenyan that already feels overburdened by taxes. You're talking about the pressure that there is from out there to reduce the cost of living, to reduce food prices, to make life bearable to Kenyans, to create jobs. And all this then would require you to raise money. You cannot borrow, and again, increasing taxes again, it means that you're squeezing the very little that is left out of Kenyans. And so it's going to be a very tricky balancing act to do. And that's why, from the message of the president, is probably looking for the third option, is that for those development projects, then you see the president leaning a lot more towards public-private partnership. So where the government is not required, we're not now therefore to borrow or increase the taxes, but it's going to have, like, for example, the dualling of Rironi-Mau Summit Road that's going to be fast-tracked, be done through public-private partnership. And therefore, somehow now managing to do the development without having to increase, whether it is taxation or having to borrow. We're talking about the president proposing to use that model even in terms of solving the issue of food security through dams, you know, saying you come, Sam, as an investor, we're going to facilitate you with what government is to facilitate with, build the dam, and then you'll be selling that water to the users based on what they use. And then once you recover your money, then that project can be taken over. We're talking about reducing unnecessary government expenditure, and I really see the president doing that. Remember, one of the things that he said was scrapping that the State Department was supposed to reduce the budget by around 300 billion. We saw that in practice, you know, last weekend, saying that if you brought unnecessary aids to this meeting, then you have to foot that for yourself. So if then we talk about that prudent financial management, preventing spillage and waste of public resources, and not getting tempted to borrow, you know, in terms of now being creative on making sure that that they're able to fund all these public projects, not through borrowing or not through taxation, but through public-private partnership. I think that's how it's going to overcome the challenge. But to be honest, the biggest balance the president has to do is how do you spur economic growth? How do you complete those stall projects? How do you start new priority projects that are important for this country without necessarily, again, having to borrow or without having to increase or to overburden Kenyans with taxes? And then you see the impact of counties, and so I'm very happy that even in the inaugural retreat, then there was the presence of county governments into the meeting, because again, this is not during Kibaki's time when we only had one government. Now we have 48 governments, 47 counties and one national government. And now these 47 countries relying or basing their expenditures and their CIPD plans by funding from Treasury. And one thing that has been constant throughout, including now, and you hear it even a lot with the governor saying now we have not been able to start even the projects. They have not, some of them been able to pay their salaries on time, is through the late releases of exchequer from Treasury. So if really this country has to grow, that synergy, and it should almost be seamless between the county government and the national government, must exist. And I'm really looking forward to seeing that actually happening in purpose and in real, and I think there's a lot of goodwill also from the counties, because even governors that are leaning on Azumio's side, you know, we saw them present at that particular meeting. We've seen them seek audience with the president and set the priorities and match the priorities of the counties, those of the national government.
Okay.